Who really owns and operates your favorite cruise line? Be prepared for some surprises. I'm Gary Bembridge. This is another of my tips for travelers. I want to talk about who actually owns the various different cruise lines around the world, because when I talk to people about this, there's lots and lots of surprises and people are really quite amazed. A couple of things to note. Did you know that only 3 key corporations control the cruise lines that 75% of passengers go on every single year? Just 3 corporations, one of which controls cruise lines that cover half of all passengers cruising around the world today. There's 2 big trends happening as I see it within cruise lines. First of all, the big cruise corporations, they're slowly taking up all the different independent cruise lines around the world. And what they're doing is they're creating a big mass market value brand. They're creating a premium or luxury brand with a big or medium-sized ships that go to all the famous places in the world, the big popular ports. They normally also have a smaller ship premium or luxury cruise line that can go to the more out of the way, more unusual places. And they then also have an ultra luxury brand, which is increasingly they're using to go into expedition cruising. The second thing is we're seeing more and more corporations, particularly travel corporations, getting into the world of cruising and launching a cruise line under their name. Before we talk about those corporations that control everything, do you know who the biggest cruise lines in the world are? In 7th place is AIDA, which is a cruise line which focuses on the German consumer. In 6th place is Costa. They focus very much on the Italian consumer. In 5th place, you have Princess Cruises. Princess Cruises have just under 7% of all passengers in the world today go on Princess. The 4th biggest cruise line in the world, and also one of the youngest cruise lines, is MSC Cruises. They have over 7% of all passengers in the world go on an MSC cruise every year. They're focused particularly in Europe. They create a very European experience. The 3rd biggest cruise line in the world is Norwegian Cruise Line, and they have around about 10% of all passengers in the world go on a Norwegian cruise. The 2nd biggest is Royal Caribbean International with around 90% of all passengers, and the biggest cruise line in the world is Carnival with their fun ships, which have over 22%. So those are the 7 biggest cruise lines in the world. But what and who are those 3 big cruise corporations that control 75% of all passenger trips on a cruise? The biggest cruise corporation in the world is Carnival Cruise Corporation. 50% of all cruise passengers go on one of the Carnival owned companies every single year. They have 9 cruise lines at the time of recording. They obviously have Carnival, which is how they really started right back in the early 1970s. They have fun ships, and they basically take almost a quarter of all cruise passengers every single year go on a Carnival cruise. And they are the brand that really created all the excitement around cruising in the way that we know it today. Well, the other 8 brands that they have, some of which you might find a big surprise. In the premium end, they have Princess Cruises, which, as I mentioned, is the 5th biggest cruise line in the world. And that is very much a luxury cruise line with a very large fleet, over 20 ships, and they cruise all around the world, and they basically base ships all around the world. Really, really popular luxury premium cruise line with sort of large ships. They also have Holland America, which is a very traditional cruise line with Dutch heritage dating right back to the 1800s, the late 1800s, and a very strong link to Holland. And they do also have a very traditional cruising experience, and they do cruise all around the world, and they're very, very strong, as are Princess in Alaska. They were the 2 cruise lines that originally went into Alaska. They also control in the luxury premium end P&O Cruises out of the UK, P&O Australia. On the ultra luxury side, they have Seabourn, which has small ships providing very ultra luxury experience, and of course they are now also going into expedition cruising. They then control some brands which cater to very specific markets. So they have AIDA, which is for the German market. They have Costa, which really caters to the Italian market. And then one of the brands which they have, which is probably one of the most famous cruising brands of all, is Cunard. Yes, Carnival Corporation control Cunard. So Carnival is often seen as one of the cheapest places to go cruising. Cunard is often seen as one of the big prestigious because of their liners, particularly Queen Mary 2, and the transatlantic crossing that they do. So those are all the brands within the Carnival Corporation portfolio. 50% of all cruises will go on one of those Carnival brands every single year. The second biggest cruise corporation in the world, where roughly a quarter of all passengers travel with every single year, and that's Royal Caribbean Group. Royal Caribbean Group has 6 cruise lines within its portfolio at the time of recording. Royal Caribbean International, the big mega ships, the huge big ships with lots of innovation. They were the first really to bring the big resort experience on board with their water parks and their flow riders and their ice skating rinks and all sorts of big innovations. So they create massive big ships with lots and lots of resorts features. They also have a number of other interesting brands. So for example, in the premium end, they have Celebrity Cruises, which is a more contemporary, although still fairly traditional cruising experience. And Celebrity are very popular, and they are becoming more and more innovative with the launch of things like Celebrity Edge and Celebrity Apex. But it is still very much a traditional cruising experience operating in the more premium luxury end. Their ultra luxury brand is a very interesting one. It's Silversea. So Silversea is now part of the Royal Caribbean Group, and they are very big in ultra luxury cruising, so competing with Carnival's Seabourn, but also have a very big and fast growing expedition business. They also own Pullman Tour, which is a cruise line which is very focused on the Spanish market. Now, the other thing that a lot of people don't know about Royal Caribbean is they have a joint venture, 50-50 joint venture with TUI Cruises. So TUI Cruises is really big, particularly within Germany, and they have right throughout Europe, TUI Cruises, big brand, and that is a partnership with TUI Cruises and Royal Caribbean. So Royal Caribbean have those 6 groups of cruise lines. The other cruise brand within Royal Caribbean is Azamara. Azamara is a smaller ship cruise line, and they really focus on the destinations. So they talk a lot about destination immersion. So as part of the Royal Caribbean family, they are their small ship, premium, destination focused brand. The next big cruise corporation is the Norwegian Cruise Corporation. And Norwegian Cruise has 3 critical brands at the time of recording. The first is the most famous of all, of course, which is Norwegian Cruise Line. Norwegian Cruise Line became famous for creating freestyle cruising. So it's the most relaxed, the most informal of all the cruise lines, and you can basically have a huge range of dining options, bar options, big glitzy entertainment, and it's a much more relaxed, one of the most relaxed of all of the cruise lines. You can wear shorts, for example, to dinner on board Norwegian Cruise Lines. So it's very popular for people looking for informal cruising with lots of bells and whistles. They do then have a ultra luxury and a luxury brand. So on the luxury side, they have Oceania. So that's their premium brand. Relatively small ships, and they are especially well known for their food. They claim to spend more per passenger than anybody else on food, and they have big, glitzy and really impressive menus. And because they're smaller ships, they can also go to the more out-of-the-way places. On the ultra-luxury side, so competing with things like Seabourn and Silversea, is Regent 7 Regent 7 very luxurious, and they are the most all-inclusive of the ultra-luxury brands. So they do include things like the excursions, Wi-Fi, gratuity, all those kind of things within their fares. So Norwegian Cruise Line is operating like the others across all the spectrums of the cruising industry. So those 3 big cruise corporations, Carnival, Royal Caribbean and Norwegian, 75% of passengers go on brands owned and operated by them. So what about the rest of the cruising industry? Well, I've already mentioned MSC Cruises, which came out of the MSC cargo business, which is very fast growing and over 7%. There's a couple of really interesting things happening. A lot of corporations are starting to get into cruising. One of the most significant of those is one that most people in Europe and North America aren't that aware of, and that's Genting Hong Kong. Genting Hong Kong used to be one of the big shareholders actually in Norwegian. They sold that, and they're now focusing on brands much more in the Asian side, but they do own Crystal. So the very ultra luxury Crystal is part of Genting Hong Kong. They also have Dream and Star Cruises, which are very big in Asia. But there's lots of corporations getting into cruising. So Disney, of course, has the Disney Cruise Line. Virgin is launching Virgin Voyages. Viking, which was in river, it has gone into ocean cruising as well. Saga, which is a UK insurance company, has Saga Cruises. I've already mentioned TUI, who are big in travel. They have TUI Cruises in Europe and they have Marella Cruises in the UK. And even some of the brands that are much smaller, like Ponant, have taken Port Gauguin over in French Polynesia. And then Windstar is controlled by a big travel company, Xanterra Parks and Resorts. 3 cruise corporations control over 18 of the most famous and well-known of the cruise brands. How many of those brands have you been on having no idea that they're actually controlled by one of those big corporations? I hope you find this interesting and helpful. If you're a big fan of cruising, remember, I have many more videos of tips, advice to watch about cruising. So why don't you watch another one of those right now?